Okay, so welcome all to this joint session gathering SIM 9 and 10. I will make a general opening related to the community of users, and you see the word here, connecting. I'm a connector actually in with respect to the community of users, and we are living in a complex world. Actually, we are. And I will use the word differences. We have different population, different risk perceptions, different risk awareness, different decision-making processes, policies for different risk, different actors, practitioners, scientists, policymakers, industry SMEs. Well, this makes our world a little bit fragmented. And the community of users has been grown in this, I would say, dynamics that we need to ensure that people speak to each other and try to ensure that when we are, I heard yesterday a critical comment about silos. Yes, we are working in silos. We are working in our discipline silos. We are working in our sector, in our very often culture. And it's wrong to say that we should destroy the silos, because humanly we feel good in our working environment. So what we need to ensure is not to make a kind of reshuffling of everything, but create bridges between different sectors, between different disciplines, to understand that when we are to deal with risk management, disaster risk management, and here we are speaking about geological disasters and climate extremes, we need to ensure that we know each other from the different sectors, different disciplines, different culture, and that we do not miss opportunities. So it's a little bit what I will stress now, is this bridging need, this connection need. There is a Brazilian poet, Vinicius de Moraes, who say, life is the art of gathering. It's what you are doing today. So we are gathering between different actors to try to work together. So François, this is blue is the color of esperance, Okay, so I will make it very quick because many of you have already seen this kind of thing. But when we speak about connecting, tu peux peut-être cliquer parce que le truc là, il est pas. Okay, so as in different countries, we have to face different kind of policies. So already when we are speaking about natural hazards, geological disasters, extreme events, and so on, we have many different fields which are interconnected. We need to ensure that indeed the policy are well complementing each other, not duplicating, and in harmony, so that at the implementation level, we are doing a job which makes sense. We have different international agencies, European agencies, UN bodies, Interpol, and so on, which are also involved in this circus, and research family. And by research, we have also many different programs that are taking place related to the themes you are facing with, and sometimes the different projects, the different programs are also disconnected. We have to ensure that we are making bridges also between not only the different policies, but also between the different research areas, so that when you are, and you have a lot of representatives here today, we do not miss synergy possibilities. So what is at stake is, while we are facing with disaster risk management, and we are prone to look at operational features, so we are developing research and technological development to ensure that we are helping policy implementers, practitioners to do their job more efficiently in the field. And this wide scope is being covered by this umbrella that you are now participating in, which is a secure, safe, and resilient societies, where geological hazards and climate-related hazards is part of it, but it's only part of it. So we need also to ensure that we have different connections between different fields, for example, cascading effects on critical infrastructure, health-related aspects, and so on. This world is really connected. And we are all faced with different issues related to prevention, preparedness, monitoring, response and recovery, and so on. There are technologies which may be valid in one field that could be helpful in another field. But if we don't put that clearly on the table, we're also missing opportunities. So again, connecting technical people so that we are communicating to different actors. And typically, well, we are representing here the research, policymaking, practitioners, industry, and we are missing a little bit the fifth element, which is the citizen dimension. We are working on it. We are trying to ensure that the rest topic are bringing this citizen dimension in our programming, but it's not easy because, well, citizen, how do we involve people in the streets? We have to maybe approach cities, network, regional authorities. So what we are exploring, and we will need your help in this respect. So typically when we are dealing with a specific issue, and here today we are speaking about natural hazards, geological disaster, climate extremes, we are expecting projects to be in the middle of a complex policy framework. So here typically, if you are dealing with different type of hazards, you will need to look at the environment policies, flood directives, the water framework directive, drought policies, and so on. DG climate action, which is everywhere actually, because we are ensuring that our policies are made climate-proof in a way. DG eco, civil protection, so from the response side, but also internationally the IPCC, obviously, the Senai Framework for Action, and the industry, I would say, part, which is what we are expecting also, how to bring the research to the market, which is also a dimension which needs not to be forgotten. So here, well, what needs also to be reminded is that we are working in EU funding programs, but ultimately the people who will take actions in the ground in case of a disaster are very often local, regional people. So we need to ensure that we are understanding very well this, I would say, transition from international to local. So it's not only bringing bridges between disciplines, different sectors, but it's also bringing bridges, establishing bridges from the international to the local. Very complex issue, which requests that we are all working together in good trust and confidence. Because if we don't establish these links, some way it will be disconnected. And as you know, well, in a chain, if there is a weak part in a chain, it does not work. So somewhere we need to ensure that we have a mechanism which is working well in harmony between different actors, but also from the, I would say, top to the bottom. Well, involving policymakers, technology providers, responders, citizens, it will be really what you will be discussing today, and that has been discussed yesterday as well. And you know, as many scientists, that very often, and it has been also my tendency when I was a researcher, we are dealing with the communication, we are very happy, we are performing research, we are publishing nice papers, and if we are actually touching a little bit, transferring this paper to different people, and if it passes to the media, we are the happiest scientists of the world, and we think the job is done. But the job is not done. The job is done for your discipline. You are rewarded as scientists because you have published a very nice paper that has been diffused in different medias. But it doesn't mean that the research output have been implemented. So there are steps that have to be looked at and which now in Horizon 2020 is starting to be in full swing, which is really looking at the different decision makers at regional, local level, and how to demonstrate actually that research works in, I would say, in situ situation, you know, in real situation, involving the people who are potential users. practitioners, maybe local decision makers, how to ensure that indeed technologies, methods that have been developed in research are bringing attention to these people who are potential users and involving them. So this is evolving. In FP7, we are not yet at this stage. In Horizon 2020, we see more and more these interactions, and the community of users has been also contributing to bring people together. But we are not yet there, because there is a false perception still that involving people means that we put them in a proposal, and 6 months before the end of the project, we suddenly realize that we should inform policymakers, practitioners, to tell them, look what we did. Is it not wonderful what we did for you? It's too late. If you tell me something where I've not been involved, I will say, yes, well, okay, fine. Well done, good job, ciao. I will not take it over. Why should I take it over? So I think it's very important to involve people upstream, that is, and we are now more and more doing that, at research programming level, how to involve the different actors to define the topics that we will be publishing. And then when there is a new project starting, from the very, very, very first start of the project, involve them in saying, okay, it's what we'll do. You will be called to help us in research design. We'll do the job in research development, but then at a certain point, we need your view to know whether we are taking the right direction, and we will invite you for the demonstration, because we need you to validate our finding. And for the policymakers, it's the same. We know that your policy is being evolving in such a way that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, your technical needs will be related to implementation and helping the member states, which needs this kind of technical development. We are working on that, and we will inform you regularly on what we are doing. If you don't do that, your report will arrive to a desk, and I've been a policymaker at the Commission. I've got a lot of reports from fantastic research projects which were accumulating on the right part of my office with a yellow basket which was below. And we don't have time to read big reports. So if we are not informed regularly and involved in kind of meeting like that, at a certain point, we do this. We do a vertical archiving. We cannot cope with all this information. So we have to be very, very clear in this respect with the formatting of information, the way we are interacting with the different actors, and it is not something to be done at the end of the project. So when we are all together here, in a way we are speaking more and more about community of practices. Community of practice means bringing people together to exchange information in a very, very transparent way. It's not easy to get out from our box. But if you don't get out from your box, even if you are only here and you are still in your box, but if you don't do it, why should others listen to you? So we need to take this risk of going out of our zone of comfort and speak to people, because what is bringing in terms of ideas, flushing, is absolutely amazing. So here in policy, while it is clear that we are regularly having meetings with different policy sectors from the international TU policies and with member states, obviously, we need to ensure that we are not missing any leading projects. That is, if you are funded, you have a funded project from different programs, you are not working together, because while it's a competitive atmosphere, if you are not requesting to do it, why should you should do it? We are now in the situation where we should facilitate this as Commission. We have a role of facilitator to bring the project together, not only research, but also capacity building. Typically in the climate area, there are a lot of projects which are funded by DG ECO from capacity building, Life Plus by DG Environment, DG Regio and direct projects, and I discover more and more projects which have a direct link to research. And then when you go to education, Erasmus, Marie Curie, which are also dealing with this, it's completely scattered, and we miss completely the links between research, capacity building, and education. We are not well organized. And when I say we, it's a collegial say. It's not only the Commission. you are not well organized as well. So we need to work together to improve this and to ensure that we are not missing opportunities to link research capacity building and education, build up synergies when it's possible, because it's not always possible, but at least that we know what the others are doing. We need people who are mediating. It's very difficult for scientists, and I had this experience, to directly have a dialogue with policymakers on industry. It's not our job. We are a little bit lost. But there are people who have this holistic vision. Let's use them. We have mediators. Maybe they are consultants or the research organization who have people who have a larger horizontal vision. We need to be helped by this kind of people who have also a knowledge about the market dimension, so that we are really bringing all this all together. Support to policies, usability by practitioners, opportunities by industry SMEs, and then maybe at the end of the day we can say to the citizens, well, look, it is our strategy what we have done. We are responding to policy needs. These tools is perfectly accepted and validated by practitioners, and then it was brought to the market, and now it's purchased by organization, and it is serving the needs for the society, because with this we have saved 3 hours in detecting victims in an earthquake, and we saved 50 lives. This is a direct, I would say, outcome of this kind of coordination. So it's quite important that we are all working together. If we do that, we will be in a very strong position to liaise with users. So this is what, well, I know that this is awful, but it is what the community of users is trying to develop. So this with community of practice linked with the above programs where we are trying to do our best to build up synergies, and all the policies. It is very complex, but in a way it is the reality. It's complex. We have to ensure that this complexity will make it simpler in a way. I'm not using complicated. It's complex. We have to face this. So we have to develop further the access to information, and you will see that we'll have mapping done according to different categories. There is one that report on Horizon 2020 2014-15 report that will be released at the end of the month by category. So if, for example, if you are looking at flood research, you will have all the projects funded by different programs, including capacity building, in the same, I would say, category. And then you will have one on storm, drought, earthquake, and so on. Already we are trying to categorize this so that we are facilitating the search of information. We'll do the same for 2016-17, enlarging to ECHO, Life Plus, and Terrec project. Access to information. So we need to know exactly what is the puzzle. We need to then help. There is a bug. Tu peux cliquer peut-être? Well, we need to ensure that we are establishing a very strong dialogue between different actors. And it's why you are here today. So you see, you're enforcing dialogue. So we need to ensure that we are all speaking together and not to miss opportunities regarding what I told already about this anticipation of needs from policy, industry, and practitioners. And at the end of the day, we have to strengthen a platform of exchange that should become sustainable. And it's a change of paradigm with respect to the way of working. And what you are doing today is a change of paradigm. We are anticipating what could be a normal working practice in 5 to 10 years. We have to work together in harmony with regular contacts and producing very concrete information to different actors. If we don't do that, we will continue to be very, very scattered, and we will miss, I would say, credibility. And if we are not very strong in our shoes, even regarding someone in the street, it is leading to Brexit. It is as simple as that. It's not because we did not do sufficiently, it's because we did not communicate in a proper way. It is absolutely clear. And then there is a lot of political manipulations, which we are not controlling this. But at least if we are very clear in what we are doing and bringing to the European society, we'll be in much stronger position. So this is my little speech of introduction. And speaking about community of practice, I would like to give the floor 5 minutes to one example that is coming from a project called Driver Plus. And Alexandra will present this example in 5 minutes. I thank you very much.
Thanks for the kind introduction, Philippe. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexandra Schmidt, and I'm part of the team that currently develops the Crisis Management Innovation Network Europe, short CMINE, within the framework of the Driver Plus project. I'm very excited to be here today to announce this young initiative and to give you a first idea of what we have been developing within the past year. I don't have much time, so I would like to focus on 3 key questions. First of all, why is there a need for a community of practice in crisis management? Second, what is it all about? And third, how can you get involved? As we all know, there are many projects and networks related to crisis management at national, EU, and international level. But there's no overarching crisis management network, both on EU level and beyond. Let's look into the consequences of this. Loss of information knowledge, which hinders stakeholders to be as innovative as they want to be. A slow market uptake of new solutions. A lack of joint efforts due to the lack of engagement within the crisis management landscapes. To overcome these hurdles or gaps or lacks, the EU-funded Project Driver Plus is establishing a community of practice in the field of disaster risk reduction, which has as its goal to serve as an overarching body aiming to connect existing networks, initiatives, and crisis management professionals to better synchronize their work and increase efficiency. To be more concrete, we would like to help to improve the market uptake of disaster risk reduction and crisis management solutions, facilitate engagement, reduce fragmentation, and address capability needs. So how are we going to do this? Let me give you a few details. First of all, the CMINE is open to crisis management professionals from different backgrounds. Policymakers, scientists, practitioners, etc. In addition, the CMINE has a wide geographic scope. Professionals working on the local, regional, and international level are encouraged to join the CMINE. The CMINE consists of an online and an in-person component. The in-person component. Members will meet on a regular basis to discuss issues and exchange knowledge in the crisis management domain. These in-person meetings form the backbone of the community. The in-person meetings are supported by the online community management tool that allows members out of the CMINE to interact outside of the meetings. The online community management tool is a fit-for-purpose tool allowing members of the CMINE to connect, interact, and exchange online. The platform is simple, user-friendly, and makes it easy to engage for everybody. And the CMINE has a dedicated group page on the CMT. What are the unique features? So the CMINE is specifically focused on professionals, as I said, working in the field of disaster risk management with a special focus on natural disasters. It makes it easy for members to interact and share ideas, expand their network, and connect with professionals from different backgrounds. The scope of activities will address the main thematic and functional topics identified in the Sendai framework, also the European Commission and the Prevention WebNet initiative. The CMINE will be structured around concrete topics focusing on natural disaster, addressing challenges that have not been addressed sufficiently in the crisis management domain, and allowing to exchange lessons learned resulting from the 4 trials currently being conducted within the frame of the Driver Plus project. So what you can see on the next slide are sample topics that could be discussed on the CMINE. However, in order to know which themes are of high relevance to you, we would need your input. So let us hear your voice. The CMINE is currently in a development stage, but at the same time it's already open to the public, because we want to make sure that the CMINE addresses your needs and the virtual platform is set up accordingly. Therefore, we need your feedback and your views on what's important for you. Today is your first chance to get involved. We have set up a CMINE booth and a CMINE poster on the lower level of the BAO, and we would welcome you to just join us down there and maybe already sign up for the CMINE, ask as many questions as you want, and you can already vote for one of the challenges you would like or topics you would like to discuss online in the CMINE. So yeah, if you come downstairs, you can also leave your email address, ask any questions. Would be great to see you down there. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. Well, now it's the time to open the joint session. You have understood that there are 2 different themes that will take place in parallel. One on climatic stream in this room, and the other one on geological disasters in the room downstairs. The first panel is, I would say, linked to the two themes. And there will be a poster session as well in the afternoon. I would like to invite the panelists and the conveners of the first joint panel, which is with Rob Lokers from Wageningen Environmental Research Institute from the Netherlands, and invite the different panelists, namely Ian Clark, from the Joint Research Center, Ian McCallum from the We Observe projects, Tony Day from the Athena Scan project from Sheffield Hallam University, and Christopher Genila from the insurance projects from Genila and CoU. There is a little mistake. Okay, please take the place. And Rob, I'm leaving you the seat now, the chairing seat.
Well, good morning. My name is Rob Lokers. I work at Wageningen University and Research, and I'm representing the PLACAR project. And I have a few slides, just as a short introduction, so at least we know what we're talking about. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Philippe and Miguel, for the invitation. So, if I can have my presentation on the screen. Yes. So, PLACAR is a research project, coordination and support action on the Horizon 2020. And well, as a matter of fact, looking back at the presentation from Philippe, it kind of addresses the midterm goal that he presented, namely enforcing dialogue. What we're trying to do on a little bit of a smaller scale there is to kind of connect and get more collaboration among the networks of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. So, it's basically a networking project. And this one, can I get the next slide, please? Not sure if this has batteries that are low, but doesn't seem to be working. Oh, yeah. So on top of this slide, you can see, kind of a simplistic picture that kind of explains the difference and the overlaps between disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. Where on one side you have, let's say, the whole issue of gradual change in the climate, which is, it is related to disaster risk reduction, but in a little bit of a more indirect way. On the other hand, you have things like phenomena like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, etc., that are, well, not really connected to climate change and climate change adaptation. But there's a thing in the middle there about, let's say, extreme weather events, which is one of the topics that we're here for today, where there's a strong overlap and a lot of, let's say, or there should at least be a lot of interaction, I think, between the two communities. Well, some of the things we're doing, I'll be very short on that. Enhancing cooperation between the networks, trying to increase research and policy coherence between the networks, between the CCA and DRR communities. Also facilitate the exchange of knowledge and innovation, and to increase synergies in research. These are some of our activities. The main activity is creating a common space for dialogue and cooperation between DRR and CCA. And there are some other tasks. And I have to remind you that we are coordination support actions. So this sounds like a lot of technical work, for example, developing shared narratives, common language, etc. But it's more of, let's say, the coordination and support part of that we're kind of trying to do. Lastly, I would like to leave you with, well, maybe a statement from the project and food for discussion. Because, let's say, the idea of the project was in 2015, it's a 5-year project, and that's in 2020. The idea was that more cohesion and cooperation between the DRR and CCA networks would lead to, let's say, more efficient decision-making, more effective decision-making, and ultimately to more resilient societies. So that's where I would like to leave you with. Then I give the floor to Ian Clark, who will tell something about his work at JRC. Oh, you have no presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I spoke on Monday and Tuesday about some of the work the JRC has been doing in relation to collecting information on different types of projects, our support in area of risk assessment and lost data. And today I would like to look at a bit of how we're working with a wide variety of stakeholders to develop collective knowledge and disseminate this knowledge. Also, you heard on Monday very briefly about the report that the Commission produced in 2017, Science for Disaster Risk Management, which was the first kind of comprehensive summary report of the state of science, particularly starting from the European base, but also looking worldwide. And a bit following on from what Philippe said, yes, we produced this report, it's been downloaded, but is it useful? I mean, this is summary of science, is it actually being used? Is our job done? And obviously not. Really, until this is something which is widely used, it won't really have shown it to be useful. So we've started a series of pilot tests using the report as a textbook in universities. And this was first launched in April this year in Enschede in the Netherlands through a network of universities called CONRIS, which works in the area of safety, security, and risk, trying to raise awareness and develop collective courses for students. And so this was a week-long course with the Science for Disaster Risk Management as the basic textbook. And there was group work and basic lecturers. And overall, this was quite successful. The lecturers found it as a very useful background document, which needed to be augmented by other examples. And in fact, the course, which was given by a colleague of mine, included some of the more technical work in relation to floods, for example, combined with the report. So this was the first step. It's going to be taken further by other volunteer universities in Berlin, Coventry, and Genoa. And so I think this is a first step to see how we can really use the results of research in the area of disasters as basic education material. We are now moving on to develop the next report, which we aim to hope to come out in 2020. You may recall the previous report looked at understanding risk, communicating risk, and also managing risk, covering all the natural hazards and many man-made hazards, from technological to nuclear hazards. Our plan is that the next report will be a continuation, but would take as its driving forces climate and health, and would rather focus on assets at risk rather than, say, the hazards themselves. So the assets which would be impacted by the hazards, particularly critical infrastructure. And I presented yesterday an example of some work we've done looking at the climate change impact on critical infrastructure. So it will also look at cascading effects, the overall systematic risk, and hopefully more quantitative risk assessment. And we're also discussing as to what extent perhaps migration, displacement could also be included now. We're very much still at the reflection phase. We have so far 200 volunteers who've put their names forward to assist in drafting this report, and this is still open for other volunteers. It is very much a volunteer process. There is no financial gain from being involved in the report, although expenses are reimbursed. We have a first meeting at the end of June of the advisors and coordinators, and quite possible that based on this work on the table of contents, we'll have need for other contributions. So this is very much what we have at stake at the moment, and it really shows an example of trying to link different policies together. As I said, climate and health really will be the focus of this next report. So, thank you.
Is this one working? Hello? Yep. Thanks very much, Ian. It's now time for the next Ian McCallum. So, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Lots of Ians today. Normally there are not so many, but that's great. Yes, okay. So as Philippe was mentioning, I'm going to be touching a little bit on citizens in this presentation. Very brief, I just have a few slides. I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the We Observe project, which is a citizen science project. It's actually a support and coordination action that's designed to kind of bring all of the citizen science efforts that are currently going on in Europe right now together and kind of harmonize all of those efforts, the so-called citizen observatory. So I'll mention a little bit about those. And I'm going to speak brief, sort of generally about citizen science in the context of extreme events and geohazards, just with a few examples. Oh, sorry. So basically, citizen science, what is that? Everyone has probably heard about it. There are a lot of different definitions, and it's kind of a bit fuzzy. There are a lot of other words that we use when we speak about citizen science, but citizen science itself involves this sort of collaborative exchange with the scientific community and with members of the public. And the ideal situation is that you have this sort of two-way exchange, but I have to be honest that very often it's still a sort of a one-way exchange where we as scientists are receiving information from people. We're still working on the mechanisms and getting that information back, or new information of value back to citizens. But that's certainly where the direction it's going. As I mentioned, there are these citizen observatories. So Europe is currently organized around these citizen observatories. There are now 4 of them that are running currently. And this We Observe project is the umbrella over top of those. In FP7, there was the first round of citizen observatories, the so-called pioneering observatories. There were 5 of those. And they were quite cross-disciplinary and really sort of doing the initial research and development in the field of citizen science. So it's all of this has been only happening for about 10 years in Europe. So it's citizen science has kind of reached a new level of activity. Citizen science has been around for a long time. There are a lot of examples going back centuries, but the sort of latest efforts have really picked up in just the last decade. There's currently actually the second European Citizen Science Association meeting going on right now in Geneva. Some 250 members of that organization. If you're interested to get more information on citizen science in general, you can have a look at their webpage, the EXA. And we're also working quite closely with the Group on Earth Observations. I just wanted to mention that, together with DG Research and Innovation. So there are a lot of different terms, crowdsourcing and so forth, that are used here. Okay, this is not showing up, that's fine. So basically, I'm just going to now give you a few examples where we have worked on in sort of related to citizen science and crowdsourcing and so forth. Pre and post crisis mapping is something that really also kind of thrust citizen science a bit into the mainstream and into the media. So if you go back to the earthquake in Haiti, 2010, there was a real lack of information, of good baseline information, mapping information available for all of the NGOs, all of the aid community that was rushing in there. And so platforms kind of developed out of that, one of them called Ushahidi, for instance, where they were able to collect information very rapidly from people, volunteers working either there on site or around the globe. And a lot of effort has gone into mapping, so online community volunteer mapping, OpenStreetMaps. Maybe a lot of you have potentially heard of that. And there are also now efforts, so that we've seen that now in more recent disasters. So in Nepal, for instance, in the earthquake there, they were already thinking ahead and trying to plan for this, so to produce better information, to have better information available when a disaster actually strikes. So. And then again, they went in and there was a lot of, again, crisis mapping, so around this kind of OpenStreetMaps, which is probably one of the best examples of citizen science, if you will, or this volunteer geographic information. Just an example of something that we have been, we're working on recently. We looked at, this was sort of after the event, so this was a bit of a trial, a test on Hurricane Matthew. So we were looking at post-disaster damage mapping. So basically providing satellite imagery to citizens. Essentially you get a pre and post-disaster image, and you're just asking people if they see damage there. And people can actually do this surprisingly well and very quickly. And so the idea was that we would like to have this sort of in place. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be in place, but once that was actually working, we could go in very quickly in 24, 48 hours after an event, go through and do a rapid mapping, sort of a damage assessment of an area. And the ideal thing, then we could eventually start moving into machine learning and so forth. Once we get enough imagery, we could start training algorithms and do this even automatically. But on the next slide here, just showing some statistics from that effort. So people are actually very, very good at some of these things if you train them a little bit. We had experts, of course, to verify some areas for us, and then we would have something to compare the volunteers with. But the idea that if you get enough people doing something, you can actually get quite good results. You get a distribution of responses. So we had something like greater than 85% accuracy here. And as I said, we're able to do quite a substantial area in a very short time and produce some damage maps. We did this together with the European Space Agency, actually. So they were helping us with the imagery and humanitarian OpenStreetMaps. Just wanted to give you, closing here shortly, one example of something that we are just launching actually on Friday. So many of you, all of you perhaps have smartphones in your pockets now, and you might have a little bit of time on the weekend. So this is a campaign, a citizen science campaign that will be running for 3 months. As I said, launched on Friday. The link is there. And this is something that an app which is essentially sending you out to a location. So these are actually what we call sort of permanent sample plots across Europe. So this Lucas survey, if some of you have heard of this, these points are sampled every 3 years since 2006 across Europe, all countries. And we want to send citizens across Europe to those same locations and actually ask you to just take some pictures there for us and record what you're seeing. And this data then is something that we can then compare with the sort of authoritative data of Lucas, but we would have it on a much higher temporal resolution. And so this is a very interesting data, for instance, to look at things like land use change. And one of the themes here, in particular in urban environments, is soil sealing, so the imperviousness of the Earth's surface. And this, of course, then has repercussions for flooding and flood resilience and so forth. So this is something that, yeah, you might just want to have a look at to give yourself a bit of a flavor of what what we're working on. Just to close here again on the We Observe project, and some of the key challenges that we've identified in the project, which I think are applicable maybe to discuss here, or interesting ideas to be aware of around citizen science. So there are these three key challenges, awareness being perhaps the first one, generating awareness about and how to build and sustain sort of critical mass, how to get people involved in such activities. But that's actually not as difficult perhaps as acceptability. So there is this big issue right now in citizen science about what is the quality of this data that's being produced, and is it comparable with authoritative data. So there's a lot of discussions and effort and research going on to that. And sustainability, of course, which was mentioned also, I think, by Philippe. How do we really scale these things up and ensure that they're sustainable and that this information can be picked up by SMEs and further built on, and how this data can sort of merge into the sort of main data stream, let's say. So I will close there, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. It was impressive. I would like to give the word to Tony Dano, say something about the Athena and SCAN projects.
Brilliant, thanks. So yeah, I'm Tony Day, and I'm just going to quickly, very briefly, look at Athena and SCAN, two different projects. One, an FP7 project, and the other, an adaptation of that project as we went further forward with one of our partners in the audience today, representing the International Organization of Migration. And then I'm going to go on to the lessons learned and some key questions to bring to the discussion. So the organization I work for, we're a research institute. We operate in the UK, but we have projects all across Europe and some international work as well. But we generally cover all areas of safety and security. We've got a very broad remit, and I think you'll see with Athena and SCAN a bit more two sort of specific implementations of that remit. So Athena is an FP7 project that started in 2013 and finished in 2016. It's a crowdsourcing platform. The aim really is that it's citizen-focused. Citizens would download the app, and they would actually push information in if they witness an incident, if they hear about a crisis. They can push information up to the sort of central command points, and then that information can actually be redistributed. Or vice versa, if there's alerts that need pushing out, they could actually push them out geographically to specific areas. Another aspect of the project was social media monitoring and automated monitoring of potential alerts. So keyword monitoring, sentiment analysis, and then sort of to try and work out where crises might be occurring, trying to get to them before those responses might come from individuals. A particular area where this usually does come into play is obviously in terror attacks, where information often actually makes it to social media much faster. And not just that, it's not just about the speed of response, it's also the richness of information that could be flooding in that actually might help the first responders on the scene to actually be able to plan their sort of approach to responding. But then when Athena came to a close, one of the main challenges I'm going to talk about in this is actually engaging citizens at such a huge level, and then actually the accountability over such a system and sort of the variations between first responders and how that can be really challenging. So I'm going to then touch on SCAN, which is the Security Communication and Analysis Network, and that's working with our partners in the International Organization for Migration. And the reason why moving on to SCAN is really interesting is because it allowed us to take this big concept and package it and wrap it up into a much more captive audience, a much smaller audience in many ways. Still a huge audience nonetheless. But it's about, again, people in the field pushing information into a centralized communication center, and people in the centralized communication center being able to push information back out. And not only that, to be able to carry out head counts, set up geofences, and work with warden systems. And then it's a whole system of information that's being funneled through here, and it's for the whole world in a lot of ways. So much of this information does build a rich knowledge repository within that environment that we can actually then use for future missions in the operations of the organization. I'll quickly show the video if that's okay, because it's so much better to listen to a video than it is listen to me try and explain it. So. If you can just click on, no? If you click on to it? No? Okay. I won't show a video, but we'll give you a link later that you can actually go and watch the video. And we'll go back to, can you flick the slide as well, please? Brilliant, thank you. So I'm just going to touch on the areas, the questions that were raised during the project, the sort of challenges we came across, just so it brings something to the table for discussion. One of the big challenges with such a project as Athena, where you're talking about citizen engagement, it's the adoption. It's who's going to actually manage and control that, and also do you trust all of the users in the, on the ground to actually be able to, one, not give you misinformation, but two, not to abuse the system as well. And with this, we had some ideas about what about mandatory civil service adoption. In the UK, we have hundreds of thousands of people who work in the public sector. This is one major captive audience that you could actually capture and train. So why don't you put these tools and this training and this experience into the hands of those people? And then it's like a herd immunity. You've then got, in any sort of crisis, you've got people there by chance who actually know how to use such a system and know how to communicate information that will help first responders. And then going on from there, there's also and then going on from there as well, there's also capturing smaller community groups and neighborhood watch groups, again, with a similar system, and allow them to work with themselves and work in a smaller area. Another area that we've come across is the speed at which, when you move from a telephone, so normal phone communication response, to text-based responses, there's not really good protocol in place, and it's really hard to identify exactly how how the first responders and how the people on the ground should actually be able to communicate very efficiently, very quickly. And we've identified that this is really an area of research that really needs looking into a bit more and needs standardizing, because with these kind of technologies, there's more need to actually get to that point. You can communicate a lot more information with text, and that text information can be analyzed a lot quicker by automated processes. And also thinking about not just training the civil servants, not just training the people who are actually responding or using the system who are already trained in first response. How do you train the citizens as well? How do you get them to actually know what is a crisis and what they should share, or try not to prevent them from sharing information because they're afraid of oversharing? That's not good. I think this is working now. Yeah. I mentioned before a little bit on abuse, abusing such a system, but hoax calls, they are illegal, but they do occur, and they occur quite regularly. You could put the same kind of laws and the same kind of mitigations in place even with social media tools. But how do you police that? You've got a very different kind of environment to police. It's not controlled by central authorities. So again, big questions to raise. How do we prevent the misinformation? But worst of all, the disinformation, the potential that a bad actor might actually be abusing the system, and not only to push information in to avert the authorities, but also abusing information being pushed out to alert citizens. They might actually then be able to abuse that and actually get strategic input from first responders directly. Thinking about privacy, obviously it's a major concern, particularly, we've got the GDPR now on the doorstep, which has just showed out how technology has been abusing privacy for quite a while. And it doesn't take these issues away. How do we actually deal with it? Local advisories, we need to know where people are. Local advisories are good. They're a good thing. There's a good reason to be tracked, but who controls that tracking data? These are major issues that need to be worked out, and it needs to be worked out at a social level as well. The technology isn't the issue. And we also looked on with the Athena project, how long do you run it? How often do you run it? And obviously, there's an escalation process in the UK when it comes to how law enforcement respond to major incidents. And there was the emphasis that this kind of tool might only be used in those situations. Well, if you only turn it on when there's a crisis and after a crisis, then you've potentially missed out on huge amounts of information on the run-up to the crisis. But not only that, nobody knows how to use it if it's not used all the time. So you need to have ancillary functions inside those tools that actually help. But if you're going to be knowing about people's locations in such a system, the people are terrified of this big brother notion. They don't really want the government to control people's tracking. But at the same time, they also are quite content to share such information with private enterprises and often unwittingly. So, there's these real interesting trade-offs that we've got to discuss. And I've touched on this a little bit about accountability with law enforcement in particular. Again, obviously we're thinking about the UK model for where we are. But the police, the fire service, the ambulance service, they're all different. They all have different views of what a crisis is. And how do you get them to share that view, and how do you get them to share such a system that they respond in the same way to, or they escalate in the same way? Just thinking about, again, a possible approach of how you could actually scale up something like Athena. You think about who's going to respond to it. Well, one of the big issues in law enforcement that we were talking to, and in ambulance service, for example, is they were afraid of the huge amounts of text and information coming in, the huge amounts of communication they were having to deal with. Why can't we preempt some of the service industries? Why can't we train the service industries to then act on response when a crisis actually occurs? And again, obviously there's a lot of overlap in this presentation, but the T word, the tracking issue, there's so many ways it can be abused by central authorities, there's so many ways it can be abused by governments. And we need to answer a lot of these questions. We need to work out how we could actually allow the tracking for the benefit, or automated tracking for the benefit of advisories, for alerting people, for warning people about dangerous situations, and also gathering from those people any information that might help first responders in that situation. But there's a lot of questions we need to answer around that area. But the bottom line that we really have discovered, and this is why Scan is becoming quite effective. It's a tool now that's got 1,300 users all around the world, a nice captive audience. But it's a tool that can be repurposed in other areas as well, taking some of the best bits from what we learned in Athena, and then thinking about how we grow the captive audience to be big citizen groups or civil service networks, for example. But the truth is, the technology isn't the problem right now, and even where there are problems with technology, such as in poor GSM areas and poor internet areas, that's going to go away quite quickly. The landscape of technology is changing very rapidly. But also the approach that we followed, I wanted to touch on. We followed an approach of minimum viable product. You build the tool, you get it out there in a small audience first, and we deploy it, we learn from it, and then we grow it. And we have a huge instant feedback loop, and you just keep learning, keep growing, and then your audience gets bigger. And we found that to be extremely successful in our project with the IOM organization. And again, this idea about distrust of authority and organizations at the top, being able to sort of monitor their information, or being able to sort of centrally control that kind of system, these are the issues that really need to be dealt with. So, and I'll leave it there. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm going to our last speaker, Christopher Genia? Is that Genia? Go ahead.
Good morning to you. Is that audible? Is this microphone working? Do I have to press a button? It's working. Now it's working, yeah. Rob, how much time have I got left? 10 minutes, okay. Just let me introduce myself. I'm a consultant based in Munich. Our work is historically been in the insurance industry. We're driven by climate change, natural perils, risk generally. Terror is also a risk that we look at. So basically the big perils of society. The insurance industry is, after governments, the second big stakeholder in this field. In all countries, natural perils are insured, mostly, not in all. But what I wanted to do is show you a project we're involved in. We're a big advocate of public-private partnerships for climate change, for natural perils generally. And what I want to show you is two things, really. One is the H2020 project, which I'll come to, which we're involved in, which is a public-private project. But the other is just give you a view from the insurance industry on where they stand when it comes to climate change. So you mentioned beforehand, here's science, and science bringing basically implementation onto the ground in terms of the know-how from climate change. I would say the insurance industry has certainly noticed climate change, more severity when it comes to the natural events, but is maybe not investing enough in knowing it well enough. So if you could please click, and one more, and one more. This chart, I can use that. This chart shows you 2017, what happened in the world in terms of natural hazard events. It was a very bad year for the insurance industry. Globally, there were $306 billion of cat losses. Of those, 188 billion were paid. So that's paid losses. What you see there is a change compared to 2016 of 63%. So that's a significant change. But the point I want to make with these two charts is one that there are, it's very erratic what happens when it comes to nat cat events year on year, but there is a trend that the climate is impacting on natural hazards. And when you see this distinction here of man-made, man-made seems there fairly small. There was a year, you might remember the Deepwater Horizon catastrophe, the well blowout in the Gulf of Mexico, where there was a pretty massive loss. But generally, nat cat is always there. So that is windstorms, that is tsunamis, that is earthquakes, that is the whole spectrum. On the right, the chart titled Calamity Pain shows you what is insured and what is not insured. So the pale blue peaks show you the actual insured economic loss, and the dark blue shows you what is insured, and the difference between the two is called the protection gap. So basically, who has the remaining bill? Normally the government, right? So the insurance industry takes its share, but the government tends to take the remaining share. Whoops. In 2017, you might remember from the TV pictures, the three hurricanes, Harvey, Irma, Maria. They came fairly shortly, one after the other. That was the very, very big dent. Then forest fires in California, Portugal, other European countries, they were very, very vivid in the news. The spring frost, maybe some of you don't know, but throughout Central Europe, southern Germany, Austria, Hungary, down to the Balkans, there was a very, very severe frost, which caused very bad damage in agriculture. It was the last week of April, and the temperature went to -10 at a point in time where most crops were sort of, apples in particular, maturing. And then in Asia, there was a very powerful monsoon, killed 2,670 people, and caused $3.5 billion of damage. So one big issue of, let's say, more the reinsurers is how to close this protection gap. So, ensure that more people, there's an inverse ratio. You tend to find in poorer countries a lower penetration of insurance. And if you look at the 28 EU countries, and you compare, say, Croatia to Germany or Switzerland, you'll see that, 10% of households in Croatia have any property insurance, let alone natural perils insurance. So the gap is where economic development is lowest. You find the biggest gap in insurance coverage. I wanted to show you this slide because I like it. I like the visualization of perils. You have this map of Europe, and it's the impact, basically, of climate change on the different parts of Europe. I'll leave these slides with you. I won't go into detail, because otherwise I can talk for the rest of the morning. But you can see the red, the Mediterranean region, it is getting hotter. The actual legend there shows you the impact in terms of the various extremes there are. It's not all bad news. In Poland, the wheat is growing better. It has drier summers, so that can be the inverse ratio too. Generally, it's not good news, but it's not always all bad news. So that I would like you to look at. It's in fact from the European Environmental Agency, a visual map. This I will always also leave with you because it sums up really what the insurance industry itself is doing. So if you access that link and if you click on any of those words, it's explained very clearly what the insurer does. Right, now, how does one know in 10 years' time or in 25 years' time whether there are going to be more severe floods, more severe storms? I mean, models are clearly what is being worked on. Now, models, you had the historical experience and you had a probabilistic set. And now, of course, climate modeling is putting other demands. This will really link science to the insurance industry. The insurance industry itself has only got so far in this. And at the moment, the insurance industry is not in a terribly good state. The profits are still there, but they are actually sacking people, the big insurance groups. They're worried about digitalization. And there is a trend at the moment to get rid of expensive experts who are 50 years old and older. So this is a trend that is there. This is very unfortunate when it comes to catastrophe modeling because several of them are catastrophe modelers. So the trend is really to outsource that to third parties, which means a scientist or an expert modeling company, of which there are a few American ones quite active in Europe. And what we're seeing then at the moment is really, first of all, the insurance company has to get the numbers right here because the risk of ruin is there clearly from the frequency or severity of events if they don't calculate them properly. There's reinsurance there as well. The reinsurer takes the bigger share of the risk. And of course, it's the same applies to them. They have to model properly. So the very large groups tend to model in-house. In Germany, there are 260 insurance companies. I would say 2 or 3 do in-house modeling. The others are dependent on third parties. So there are, thousands of insurance companies around Europe who are in need, really, of external advice when it comes to climate modeling. There is an initiative that we have within the H2020 model Oasis, which I will show you, and then this interaction of scientific and academic experts with the insurance industry is something that we're promoting very strongly, and I'll come back to that in a minute as well. So this is the H2020 project. It's a very large project. We are 50 people in all working in this project, and basically we have 5 NatCat risk typologies. We have tropical typhoon. We have micro-insurance, that's an African project for farmers in Tanzania. Health insurance is in fact the health of Greater Berlin due to sort of hotter summers and correlating data from the insurance industry with the data of hospitals. And then forest fire. And then, but the biggest part of it is the Danube flood model, the very European river, the Danube, 7 EU countries it passes through. It's always been dealt with by the insurance industry market by market. So there are very different, let's say, models that are used. What we're doing is we're modeling the Danube flood risk from the beginning to the end, right down. Now, what we're doing here is combining climate services with damage and loss information. Anyone who's interested in the detail of the model, I can tell you more about that afterwards. Those are the members as well. You can see some of the top European universities. We're a private sector company that's involved. There are 2 or 3. Now, our role is really leveraging the know-how of the insurance industry into this project early. So it's not as though the scientists are just working away. It's a 3-year project. They are working away, the scientists, and we're helping them. And what we do is every 6 months we do technical review meetings where we get from the top insurers, their top modelers, to come into a room and look at what is being developed, because they, H2020 Insurance, they are the future recipients for the model. And the idea is, of course, they can influence the model build. So this is maybe what's gone wrong in the past. A lot of models have been built. 2 minutes left. Thank you. We have ourselves spent a lot of time with JRC. I got to know JRC more coincidentally 7 years ago. I'm very happy that I did actually make the journey down to Ispra in northern Italy. And we have been, let's say, when I say cooperating, people from JRC come to our annual workshop, which is an experts workshop on extreme events and natural perils. The data issue is a very big one. JRC has a lot of very important data for our work that is available. It's freely available. What made me very sad, really, is to realize that the insurance industry basically hardly knows of the existence of JRC. And then JRC's role, of course, is to give policymakers scientific proof of whatever they're working on. But that, I think, is a field where something can be done. Thank you very much. That's really what I wanted to say, and thank you for your attention.
So, thank you very much, all 4 of you. I think we kept time pretty well. We started quite late, but we are in time with the presentation themselves. There's some room for questions and remarks from the audience now, I guess. So people who have a question can pose them and tell who you want to have the question answered by. Anybody? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I have a question about the ethical and political issues. At the session on interoperability and information exchange yesterday, one of the things that is a big motivation for asking for more interoperability is the terrorist threat in our societies. But there were 265 people died of terrorist attacks in 2016. We spent 4,060 million euros on developing interoperability in this sector. 24 million people were displaced by slow onset climate change events. And we spent 5 million euros on that. So I wonder whether there's opportunity for synergy, because one of the discussions that we had in the interoperability panel was about issues around digital ethics and new partnerships and sharing data and working with data, and the need for more ambitious, more innovative approaches to privacy-preserving things, multi-party computing, so that you can actually process massive amounts of data, but in a way that respects fundamental rights and European values. And you seem to be, having in citizen science and in working with climate-related data, the same questions and very similar issues. So I wonder whether you see a possibility for using the funds, catching 2 birds with 1 stone, basically.
Anybody who wants to give a response?
I'll answer maybe first of all about the data. I mean, there is a new data directive that has just come out. So basically, data is becoming more covered, lid on it. There's less willingness to hand over data as easily as before. That's number 1. Number 2, I would say that also governments within the EU have very different attitudes to releasing what we would say would be standard data, we can probably get it somewhere, right? If we go into the web and we crawl and we get it together, the FAO or the UN, certain, let's say, economic data we will get. Risk data is different. So insurance companies have to protect their data. When it comes to the 2 points you mentioned, then sort of terrorism and refugees, I think the EU is doing, on the refugee side, enormous work. So I can't see that that's part of, let's say, the projects here. Terrorism stands there. It's, of course, very, very visible. It's a shock horror if you think of 9/11, right? What happened there. And then we've had our European incidents. And then I can't really comment on the proportion now of expenditure from one project to another because they're not really related. But the data issue, you can say, is related in a way. Data is omnipresent. Data can be accessed. We can get data that maybe others can't get. We use artificial intelligence also then to work on data. So basically, a lot of speed can be gained there in understanding better through data management.
I think it's also worth adding from our perspective that the technological aspects are not the problem. There are amazing ways that we can share the data from a technological perspective. And there's also, as you mentioned, about decentralizing that personal data possibly as well. There's ways that we can do all that now from a technical point of view. From a policy point of view, that's where it becomes much more challenging for us, and that's where I can't really talk an awful lot about. But just to add that the technology is really there for that.
Just maybe to add also from our side, so we work very closely with the group on Earth observations, and just to maybe make the point there that they promote very much open data, not only within Europe but globally. And so all of the new satellite data that's coming from the European Sentinel satellites is actually open, and they're really and there is big emphasis and work right now on making all of that data interoperable, so exposing it all, providing services for the research and the wider community.
I fully agree. Yes, I mean what's coming from space, I think, is amazing in terms of the quantity of data. Is actually being able to exploit this, and I presented yesterday this tool, the Risk Data Hub, which I think is, well, really for us, it's just an example as a tool which can then be used. I do think there is a change of attitudes, though, becoming, particularly at local level, of the need for data. And so having these tools such as the Risk Data Hub, showing also what has been collected at European level, which can then be corrected by what people then actually have collected at local level. I think that's perhaps the way forward, because I don't really see us ever going towards legislation requiring such disaster data to be collected.
Maybe a small thing to add. I'm working myself on a big open data project, which is focusing more on, let's say, developing countries. But what I see is that in a lot of domains we're looking at, like, we look at weather data, we look at land data, we look at nutrition data. Nutrition, there's not too much, let's say, discussion about open data at all, so you really have to explain the concept. In weather data, especially in developing countries, a lot of weather services do kind of step back when you mention the word open. So even though open data is kind of advancing, I think there's still a lot of work to do over there. So we have a next question from the audience.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Roland Nussbaum. I'm CEO of Mission Risque Naturel in France. It's an association launched 18 years ago by the insurance industry. It's similar. In fact, it's the third in the world after Institute of Business and Home Safety in the States, launched already in the 80s. Institute of Catastrophe Loss Reduction launched in Canada, similarly, at the initiative of insurance undertakings altogether, more or less, in the 90s. And the French initiative launched in reaction to the major events of '99 occurred in France, and the initiative started very modestly, but increased in the 18 years of experience with many partnerships with the state, the local authorities, and associations, some of them being here. I would like to congratulate the European Commission services to continue to believe in the partnership with the insurance industry. And I discover, by the way, this project, although having followed many other. I was like the British colleagues who just arrived, victim of an infrastructure disorder at Midi Station, so I did not attend the beginning, but was lucky to attend the last presentation and the one before. And as regards this presentation, I would like to say that you are right, mostly, but not totally. The insurance industry, through the experience I just mentioned, is definitely involved in this data issue, is willing to share, although it's sometimes still kind of announcement more than a reality. But the French example, the Norwegian example, are two really obvious cases. They have been presented and they participate to the GRC activities on EU loss data. As I tend, being myself the vice chair, former chairman of the Insurance Europe Sustainable Non-Life Working Group, they tend to convince our other colleagues from other European insurance market to follow this mainstream, this stream, which is not yet a mainstream, of course. And so I can announce that between my colleagues, the chairman and the vice chair and the secretariat of Insurance Europe, we have invited the GRC for our next meeting in fall. So this shows that the trend is there. To finish, to make an announcement. We are also part of the so-called iDream Society for Integrated Disaster Risk Management. And through our efforts, together with universities, in this case, university and the French National Platform, AFPCN, we have been selected to host the 2019 conference of this international association. And the theme will be public-private partnership with, the theme will be the aim of DRMKC with practical examples. You are, of course, all welcome. The place will be Nice, a nice place. The exact date will be decided between Friday and Monday with the chairman of Professor Adam Rose, the chairman of iDream Society, and the colleagues from Nice. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a clear and positive message from the insurance industry, I guess. Is there somebody from the panel who wants to react on that right now?
I mean, the point I made is it's very uneven, right? So Norway is a very pure, transparent country anyway, right? So you find people's tax returns on the web. So when it comes to data generally, I was saying it's a very uneven situation. Some countries are very protective, particularly in Eastern Europe, we find very protective. And then insurers, of course, they are unwilling to release their loss data if they have a strong leadership position often, because then the competition gets data which they shouldn't have, right? So there is a very competitive side to loss data. Loss data gives you the capability to rate your risks better if you have, let's say, 75% market share and keep out the smaller participants.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Another question? I think the last question, Philippe, how much time can we steal from the break?
So a short question or clarification to our colleague there on We Observe, Citizens Observe. I mean, there is for the moment a plethora of applications, smartphone application all over the places, and the citizens is requested to make photos to send it somewhere. So how will you coordinate this kind of, let's say, plethora of information, of pictures that the countries may receive? And I mean, and how will the receiver manage to handle this kind of information? So it's also a question on this kind of things. Who takes decision What are you going to do with this thing? How are you going to coordinate this? I think it would be interesting to know how your projects will deal with this difficult aspect.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. There wasn't enough time to get into all that, and probably we can discuss further. But yes, we have. I mean, we are not working with, so we have sort of specific campaigns which we target communities and collect information from them. So we are not dealing still at this point with what I would call big data at this point. So it's still manageable, the information that we are getting. But you're very right that there are many, many apps being produced and many groups collecting data. And we heard also from Tony where there's places, all groups, projects, everybody, JRC, building many apps for citizen science. And that is a very good point. Where is all this information going? And that is a bit of the purpose of We Observe, is that we are trying to build sort of this engagement platform that we're calling, but we need to introduce standards, of course, in order that this data can easily be exchanged. Privacy and all these issues are very important as well. So managing the data is not really an issue, again, from the technical side, but coordinating it in terms of ways that it's easy to then for others to use and ingest. So we're trying to do this with larger communities. So with the Group on Earth Observations, with the Inspire Directive, with these broader European and global organizations to help them be able to pick up this kind of information and ingest it more easily into their services. But it's a big challenge. It's a very good point.
Okay, one short question for the break.
I don't think the point is about. Thank you. I don't think the point is about cooperation and coordinating initiatives. If you look, there are very few of them which are actually used, especially in the long run. So I think, as it has been said by one of the presenters, the difficulty is not technical. It's very easy to make an app. What is difficult is to engage with the community and to have a retention of participants. If you look at the duration of apps now on smartphones, it's no more than a few months. So I think this is the key point, and very often in the citizen science project, they fail simply because they have no clear strategy to engage with their community.
Any reaction from the panel?
To that, I mean, yes, so we've actually just launched, we're launching today actually in the framework of this We Observe project, so it's just 6 months underway right now, but we're launching 3 communities of practice. So we are, and together with the European Citizen Science Association, so trying to get things organized. You're very right that these apps, they're just coming and going, and of course, it's very frustrating for people if they're using something and then suddenly it just stops working, or they get no feedback or anything from that, so there will be no sustainability. So the sustainability issue is very important. What also we see is important is to have some sort of business model there, so that SMEs can actually rely and count on this data, that there is some longevity and that they could start to build and pick up on this information. So we're also working with the Commission, with the European Space Agency, with Copernicus to try to have a situation where information could actually flow into a system like that and end up in these sort of services that are coming from the European Commission. But this is a big, big challenge. We're not there yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I think one of the things I want to bring back from my presentation really is we believe it's about capturing the different captive audiences, and there are some really large captive audiences that you could obtain, and the civil service being one of those, and public sector workers being one of those, and you could actually mandate the use of these tools in those areas if policy so wished to do so. So crowdsourcing can be done at that level. It doesn't have to be every individual citizen. But there's still an advantage if you do capture one of these bigger audiences. And that might even be community groups as well. But that's not to say that's the only answer. It's just one option.
Okay. I think we'll close the session by then. Thanks to all the presenters over here for their active role in the panel. Thanks for the questions from the audience. And, well, you're free, of course, to contact any of the panelists during the day if you have any other questions or remarks. Thanks.
Minutes break. The team 10 will go downstairs with Agnès Robin. You can raise your hand. She will be leading you there. And Miguel will stay here for the climate session.